Bin Laden was gone, but what would the United States do now? Still tormented by its demons, it turned its gaze fully to China as a new threat and persisted in treating Russia as an old one, as well as maintaining Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela as regional threats. Seeking to find a more efficient, leaner form of warfare, Obama in 2012 announced a 14% cut in future infantry strength to be compensated for by an increased emphasis in outer space and cyberspace. First used for surveillance in Vietnam, the drone, when equipped with missiles, was now becoming the modern face of warfare and Obama's weapon of choice. He personally began selecting those on the kill list. Prior to 9/11, the United States had opposed extrajudicial targeted killing by other nations, condemning Israel's targeting of Palestinians. But by 2012, the Air Force and CIA were deploying a 7,000 drone armada, used mostly in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan. Obama expanded its usage to Yemen in 2009, where there were fewer than 300 militants. By mid-2012, that number had increased to over 1,000 as a steady barrage of U.S. drone attacks outraged Yemeni citizens. By 2012, Obama added Gaddafi's Libyan supporters, Islamic rebels in the Philippines, and Somalia to the drone list. The repercussions of this style of warfare are yet to be experienced. The number of civilian casualties of these attacks are fiercely contested by the U.S. government and several human rights organizations. When the judge asked the Pakistani-born Times Square bomber how he could risk killing innocent women and children, he replied that U.S. drones were regularly killing women and children in Afghanistan and Pakistan. The cat was certainly out of the bag, and by 2012, more than 50 countries, some friendly and some hostile to the U.S., had purchased drones. Israel, Russia, India, and Iran claimed to have mastered manufacturing lethal ones, but the most dynamic program was China's. As with the nuclear bomb, a new arms race was on. Bush had continued Clinton's expansion of NATO bases closer to Russia, breaking his father's promise to Gorbachev. Obama expanded NATO to Albania and Croatia, and despite abandoning 500 bases in Iraq, the Obama administration, in addition to an estimated 6,000 bases in the U.S., is maintaining close to 1,000 overseas bases that span the globe. The U.S. had, by late 2007, gained a military presence, according to Stanford's Chalmers Johnson, in 151 of 192 UN member nations. In 2008, AFRICOM, based in Germany, was added as a sixth command responsible for growing U.S. military presence in Africa. SOUTHCOM, based in Miami, was reorganized in 2010 to increase U.S. military presence in Latin America with bases and surveillance systems, counter-drug and counter-insurgency programs targeting manifestations of radical populism as seen in Venezuela. The Fourth Fleet was reactivated in 2008 for the first time since World War II. The Navy now has 10 carrier strike groups patrolling international waters.
America's Navy, a global force for good.
In 2011, the U.S. sold an astonishing 78% of the world's arms. During the Bush years, Pentagon spending more than doubled to $700 billion. Although the real Pentagon budget blurs into secret functions and different departments of government, by 2010, according to the National Priorities Project, the U.S. actually spends an estimated $1.2 trillion out of its $3 trillion annual budget on military, intelligence, and homeland security. A full-spectrum dominance of land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. In November 2011, Secretary of State Clinton threw down the gauntlet on China. writing, "As the war in Iraq winds down and America begins to withdraw its forces from Afghanistan, the United States stands at a pivot point." Calling this America's Pacific Century, she meant a substantially increased military involvement in the Asia-Pacific region to contain China. Beginning with the Opium Wars in the 19th century, China has been humiliated time and again by stronger foes: Britain, Japan, Russia. It fought the U.S. to a standoff in Korea in the early 1950s. China is a proud nation, the world's second largest economy, a hybrid. Part state-owned, part capitalist, it has replaced the U.S. as Asia's main trading partner. But in 1996, Chinese leaders were humiliated again by U.S. nuclear missile rattling during another confrontation over Taiwan. And with its economic interests and shipping lanes to protect, it set out to modernize its military. In 2012, the Pentagon estimated Chinese expenditures of $160 billion. But given the secrecy of the Chinese system, the real budget is unknowable at this time. Although it has only one foreign base, its hard line over disputed oil, gas, and mineral-rich islands and territories in the East and South China Seas have escalated tensions with its regional neighbors. Internally, the government, communist in name only, remains politically backward, determined at any cost to modernize, and brutally willing to stifle dissent where its one-party rule has been questioned. Western democracies, while doing business with China, have condemned these policies to little avail. But more ominously, China has again attracted the wrath of China-bashing American hardliners whose animosity dates back to the McCarthy era. A new face-off is in the works. The U.S. has returned to Asia, seeking new alliances, rebalancing its fleet, deploying its top stealth warplanes to bases within striking distance of China by 2017. It has strengthened military alliances with China's neighbors, particularly Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines, sending 2,500 Marines to Australia, the first long-term troop increase in Asia since Vietnam. The Chinese were deeply angry over the Obama administration's new arms sales of some $12 billion to Taiwan in 2010 and 11. They have accused the U.S. of seeking to encircle them. The fear of the U.S. by others cannot be underestimated. As the late conservative political scientist Samuel Huntington acknowledged in 1996.
The West won the war not by the superiority of its ideas or values or religion, but rather by its superiority in the application of organized violence. Westerners often forget this fact. Non-Westerners never do.
Progressive China experts fear the U.S. is once again employing Truman's 1946 playbook with the Soviet Union in an attempt to contain China. The same situation exists once again with Western revulsion for China's internal policies. But this time, holding $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds, the Chinese could imperil the U.S. economy in ways the Soviets never could. Historian Alfred McCoy delineated the real stakes when he wrote, "As early as 2020, the Pentagon hopes to patrol the entire globe ceaselessly, relentlessly, via a triple canopy space shield, reaching from stratosphere to exosphere, driven by drones armed with agile missiles. The triple canopy should be able to blind an entire army by knocking out ground communications, avionics, and naval navigation." But as McCoy cautions, the illusion of technological invincibility and information omniscience has failed arrogant nations in the past, as the fate of Germany in World War II and the U.S. in Vietnam attest. With tragic irony, McCoy reminds us that the U.S.'s veto of global lethality might be an equalizer for any further loss of economic strength, and that the U.S.'s fate might well be determined by which comes first in this century-long cycle: military debacle from the illusion of technological mastery, or a new technological regime powerful enough to perpetuate U.S. global dominion. But as a popular series of Star Wars movies shows, a nation dominating the world with its technology will soon become a tyranny.
Rise, my friend.
That will be hated by those who are tyrannized. China may become the first new empire to emerge in this nuclear-armed world, but an empire modeled on the US or British versions would be a disaster. Great Han chauvinism would be no better than American exceptionalism. Former defense official Joseph Nye observed that the dominant power's failure to integrate the rising powers of Germany and Japan into the 20th century global system resulted in 2 catastrophic world wars. History must not be allowed to repeat itself again. The Chinese must shun the American example, and the U.S. must reverse course. Henry Wallace worried that if the U.S. treated the Soviets so badly when the U.S. was riding high economically and militarily, how would the Soviets treat the U.S. when and if the situation was reversed? It never happened, but this race to the bottom, he understood, would have no winner. As we close out this series, we must ask ourselves humbly, in looking back at the American century, have we acted wisely and humanely in our relations to the rest of the world? A world in which the richest few hundred or 1,000 or a couple thousand have more wealth than the poorest 3 billion? Have we been right to police the globe? Have we been a force for good, for understanding, for peace? We must look in the mirror. Have we perhaps in our self-love become the angels of our own despair? The claims of victory in the Second World War and justification for the atomic bomb dropped on Japan, though aimed at the Soviet Union, were the founding myths of our domination and national security state, and the nation's elites have benefited from that. The bomb has allowed us to win by any means necessary, which makes us, because we win, right, and because we are right, we are therefore good. Under these conditions, there is no morality but our own. As Secretary of State Madeleine Albright said, "But if we have to use force, it is because we are America. We are the indispensable nation. Because we can and have threatened humanity with a bomb, our mistakes are forgiven, and our cruelties justified as benignly motivated aberrations." But domination doesn't last. 5 major empires have collapsed in the lifetime of a person born before World War II. Britain, France, Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. 3 more empires earlier in the 20th century: the Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman. If history is a barometer, the United States domination will end as well. We wisely resisted becoming a colonial empire, and most Americans would deny all imperial pretensions. Perhaps that is why we cling so doggedly to the myth of American exceptionalism, American uniqueness, benevolence, generosity. Maybe in that fanciful notion lies the seeds of American redemption, the hope that the United States will live up to that vision which seemed within grasp in 1944 when Wallace almost became president, or 1953 when Stalin died with a new U.S. president in office, or JFK and Khrushchev in 1963, or Bush and Gorbachev in '89, or Obama in 2008. History has shown us the curve of the ball could have broken differently. These moments will come again in a different form. Will we be ready? I think back to Franklin Roosevelt on the last day of his life, cabling Churchill.
I would minimize the Soviet problem as much as possible, because these problems, in one form or another, seem to arise every day, and most of them straighten out.
Calming down the situations that occur, letting things happen without overreacting, seeing the world through the eyes of our adversaries. This way lies in sharing in the needs of other countries with true empathy and compassion, trusting a collective will of this planet to survive the coming period, ending the threats of nuclear annihilation and global warming? Can we not surrender our exceptionalism and our arrogance? Can we not cut out the talk of domination? Can we stop appealing to God to bless America over other nations? Hardliners and nationalists will object, but theirs has proven not to be the way. A young woman said to me in the 1970s, we need to feminize this planet. I thought it strange then, but now I realize there's power in love, real power in real love. Let us find a way back to respect the law, not of the jungle, but the law of civilization, by which we first came together and put aside our differences to preserve the things that matter. Herodotus wrote in the 5th century before Christ, the first history was written in the hope of preserving from decay the remembrance of what men have been. And for that reason, the history of man is not only one of blood and death, but one also of honor, achievement, kindness, memory, and civilization. There is a way forward by remembering the past. And then we can start, step by step, like a baby reaching for the stars.
For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. And we are all mortal.